version control, it is a system. It is basically a system that records changes. It records changes of a file or a set of files over time. As we've said, it tracks changes to files over time, enabling the recall of specific versions. So if I have a version, if I'm using a version control system or tool, it is going to record or it's going to track changes to files, right? So, for example, if you are somebody like a graphic designer or a web designer, so you will find that you want to keep every version of an image or layer. If I start this morning, I start on version 1 and I do a layer and I get another idea that maybe I want to modify. So good practice is that I will not go ahead and overwrite the design that I did. What I can do is I can version it. So that if I want to go back and reference the original thing that I had done, the original idea, I can always go back and do it and find it. I can always recall or go back to that specific version. So therefore, you'd want a version control system, right? So it will allow you to revert to previous steps. It will allow you to compare changes. It will allow you to identify contributors. If I'm working on a team and or I have a contractor who comes in to help me on this particular project, then if I have a version control system, it will enable me to identify who is actually contributing to my project. Any changes they do will be tracked, and I can know who did what on a project. And that's why now at work, because we are working as a team, we will see that we will always use a source code management tool, but we will also version our code. We will use a version control system to enable us to do it, to always track changes, but also to identify who is actually contributing to that particular project. And also with that, one of the other benefits is that we can recover from mistakes with minimal overhead. If I've been versioning my code, or I've been versioning my files, then what is going to happen is that if I made a mistake on, let's say, version 2 or version 3 of my file, I can always go back, right? I can revert back to version 2, right? And because I have kept a document or a trail of the different versions that I have, therefore I'll have minimal overhead because I won't restart the project over because I have a copy of it. So that's what in a nutshell version control is. Now we have different types of version control system. Now the first one is called a local version control system. Now for a local control system, let's say many of us use local version control system, right? It is always our method of choice. Why? Because all of us copy files, all of us modify our files, and we copy files and move them to directory. So a good example is I send you guys a file, this PDF, right? This PDF file that I had created on my local desktop or my local computer, my local environment. I had created this file, okay? And I sent to you guys that file, and that was version 1 of the file. But I shared that, but now the problem is I've still been working on this file. So it just means that you guys don't have the latest copy. You don't have the latest copy of my file, because as I modify it, then what that means that I have to resend it. I have to resend you so that you guys have an updated copy. Now we know that we all deal with that. You work on a document, then maybe you want to save it, and we are in the habit of maybe just renaming it. I want to save it as a different name so that I have a copy, I have a backup. What you are actually doing is you are versioning. I'll just save this as a different copy. Git mod 2. I can save another copy as git mod 3. So once I do that, I am basically creating a trail, but I'm doing it locally. So the issue or the downside with this, it is you are prone to errors. Why? Because I can open the wrong file, I can modify the wrong file, and sometimes I can save it in the wrong directory. Or better still, I can delete a file that is very important. Why? Because everything I'm doing it locally, and if I don't know what I'm doing, or somebody comes on my laptop, they're doing something else, and they end up deleting a file that is very important. So that is the downside of having a local version control system. And the limitation is that there's lack of collaboration features and scalability. I cannot have you collaborate with me, contribute to the project that is on my computer, on my local file. We cannot collaborate on that. So that becomes a limitation of the local version control system. Now we have also what we call, the second type is what we call a centralized version control system. This is developed to address collaboration needs, right? So for this system, what happens is that I'll give you an example. Like when we started using Notion, the first time we started using Notion is we created a file in Notion, and I asked each of you to log into Notion, and while you are in Notion to do it, to start working on the file. Now, as you are working on that particular file, you did realize that because we were each trying to work on the same file, we were sharing a file, none of us had the latest and updated version. because anytime I update it, someone else goes and updates it. Someone else goes and renames it. Someone else goes and deletes something that I just added. So because of that, there's a lot of confusion, right? There's a lot of confusion because we are trying to work on the same file. It is centralized, but there is no protocol because none of us has the most current file. So because of that, we see that the structure is that we have a single server that contains version files, but multiple clients check out the file. So we were trying to do that. Multiple clients, many of us try to log in and we're trying to work on the same file. So the advantages is that it enhanced collaboration. Like we can do a fine-grained control. I could give permissions. I could only give at my discretion. I could give somebody a read permission only. I could give others a write permission only. I could give others just permission just to comment or permission to edit. So I can do a fine-grained control, and it's easier to administer. If I do not want anyone to read that file, then again I can set permissions so that no one is able to read that file. But the disadvantage is it introduces what we call a single point of failure. Why? Because if that file that we're working on, if that file, somebody goes out and deletes it and removes it, then none of us can do it. None of us can access that because now that's a single point of failure. You have somewhere that is centralized. You have a single server that contains your version files, but because you're running your files in a single, your files are being hosted in a single server, it introduces what we call a single point of failure. Now, because of that, this becomes a disadvantage. Okay? A disadvantage. So this is the second type of version control system that you can have. Now, most companies or environments, they do have, like, they used to have centralized version control system whereby you have a server that you set up. I can set up a server in the office or in my organization, then multiple people log into the server to do something. So that is a centralized version control system. So users will check out a file or they will collaborate on the same file. A good example when we're working with Linux, and we say that you can create files that a team can collaborate on, right? You can create a file, let's say in the temp directory, where every user on the server can get to, but they are all working on the same file. So the problem is, with that kind of a system, then you're just introducing a single point of failure. Because if somebody goes and removes that file, then nobody can access the file. Because this file, we have set up links to that file. So that is an example of a centralized control system. And some of the examples of centralized control system is CVS, Subversion, and Purpose. So you can look up what these are, okay? Now, the third type of version control system, third type of control system is what we call distributed version control system, or DVCS. Now, this is the most popular. It is the most popular because it is the solution to a single point of failure, right? To a single point of failure. So for this, clients don't just check out the latest snapshot of the file. They fully mirror what we call the repository. So if I have a distributed version control system, then everybody, every client or every user, every member of the team who is collaborating will have not just a single file, but they will have a mirror, what we call a mirror of the repository. And we will see what these repositories are. And that allows any client to restore the server. So at any time, every member of the team will have the latest version of my files, and they will have all files, so that in case the server crashes, or in case whatever server that is holding our files, if it fails, then any of the users has everything to restore that. They have a backup. So this is where distributed version control systems are very popular. And the most popular one that we're going to look at is what we call Git. Now, other examples are Mercurial, Bazaar, or that, right? Now, the benefits of a distributed version control system is there is no single point of failure because every clone serves as a full backup. So when a user logs into that repository and they do what we call a clone, or they get the code, they check out, we'll be using these terms, they'll check out the code, meaning that they have all the files. Once they check out all the files, then they have a full backup. So in case something goes wrong, they have a full backup of our files. And therefore, we say that it eliminates that single point of failure, right, aspect, okay? Now, when we look at comparisons in version control, so we have the local version control, meaning you're versioning your files on your local, on your desktop, or on your laptop. It is simple, but it is error prone. You're just working on a file by yourself. That's why most of us do it. We create backups. How do we create backups? We now have like Notion, or some of us create our documents on Google Docs, right? Google Docs, because now you're trying to centralize. And on Google Docs, you can give somebody permission to collaborate with you, right? So we try to move from local version control to something that is centralized so that others can collaborate or others can contribute, right? So that we reduce the error. So if I have it locally, if by mistake my computer crashes or I accidentally delete that file, then it just means that it's gone. But if I have put it on something like Google Docs, I can find it, I can restore it because now it is being centralized. So centralized version control system, centralized server with collaboration advantages, but it's also a single point of failure. So that is the disadvantage. But now we have a distributed version control system. It eliminates a single point of failure, and it also provides full backups. Okay. So these are some of the things that you just need to remember about version control. And all these are interview questions, or these are interviewable, right? They can ask you, what is a local version control? Examples. Can you give scenarios? What is a centralized version control system, right? And what is a distributed version control system? So we'll be focusing on Git. So in conclusion, so you have to choose the right version control system based on your project needs. So if you're a developer or you're a graphic designer, a web designer, or anybody just working on a project, you'll always have to think about the right version control system. If it is a personal project that I'm just working on, and it is not critical that if I lose the work, it's not a big deal, then I can do it locally. I can do everything on my local machine. But just remember that you are prone to error, and not just error. You are prone to lose your work in case something happens with that. Now I can decide to put it on a shared drive, on Google Drive, or Notion, somewhere that is somewhere in the cloud that if something happens to my laptop, I can still restore that. So that becomes a backup. Now, if I'm working with a team or on a team, then I want a version control system whereby everybody can collaborate or others can collaborate, and not just collaborate. It is always easier where everybody can actually have a backup. So if we are just the two of us on a team, that if my system goes down or something happens with that version control system server that we're using, that every member actually has the capability to restore it because they have a full backup of our work. And that way we avoid single point of failure. Okay?